She moved on you, Dr. Bohr. Dr. Bohr, as long as you're standing up. Amen. Galatians chapter 2, verse 11. But when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed. For before that, certain came from James. This is, so in case I forget to say it later. That's one of those things you have to keep in mind. Miss Pat, says, before that, these guys who came from James, but we last week looked and saw what James said. Okay, and what they're about to say and what they're saying and what they're causing and intimidating has nothing to do with what James says. And sometimes, that happens. It'll be those people from Landmark. Well, they may have very well come from Landmark, but they're not those people represented from right here, and that's what's going on here. This picture is, well, certain came from James. Well, that's just name dropping, because what they're about to say has nothing to do with what James agreed to just all the way back in verse 6. For before that, certain came from James. He did eat with the Gentiles. He being Peter. Peter was eating with the Gentiles. Then the Judaizers came from, quote unquote, James, and when they got there, he quit. But when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself. It even tells us why. Fearing them which are of the circumcision. I want you to understand that they are intimidating. So, nothing scares me. Well, they scared Peter. They intimidated Peter's message. So that's, Dr. Bohr, I don't mind being in Peter's group. I wish I could get in Peter's group sometimes. I don't mind admitting, you know what, sometimes I'm afraid. Sometimes pressure from the outside pressure conforms me more than inside transforming. And that's what's going on right here. Verse 13, and the other Jews dissembled likewise with him, insomuch that Barnabas also was carried away with their dissimulation. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before them all, if thou being a Jew livest after the manner of the Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as do the Jews? If you're a Jew, well then you live like you live, and you don't live like they live, and they live like they live, why do you want to make them live like you? It just doesn't seem to match, or easy to understand or read. Verse 15, we who are Jews by nature and not sinners of the Gentiles, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. Now, we've spent a little time in this chapter already. We're going to spend a little bit more, probably next week as well. This chapter, just to kind of bring it back up to where we left off, this chapter is the story of two visits. The first 10 verses are Paul's visit to Jerusalem. The second passage there is Peter goes and visits Antioch. Both visits deal with the topic of this book, which is the gospel. The first is kind of tells us what the gospel is about. The second visit tells us more about what the gospel does, what it accomplishes, what it brings about. Now, I don't know if we said this last week, so if we did, sorry. If we didn't, I want to make sure I pointed it out. I want you to realize who is at this little meeting. Galatians chapter 2, verse 9. And when James, Cephas, and John, so we got Peter, James, and John right here. Now, I'm sure I don't know this, so I don't know if they were present, but I know that Luke traveled with Paul. So I got Paul, I got Luke, I got Peter, You know who traveled with Peter? Mark. John Mark traveled with Peter. So I got John Mark, I got Peter, I got James, brother Jude, and I got John. Except for Matthew and maybe the writer of Hebrews, because I kind of think he was there. But if you want to argue and say he wasn't there, that's every writer of the New Testament except for Matthew. You want to talk about an important group. There's not many people left out. So when he came and met with the group, we get the picture of this group in verse 9, and they came to this conclusion, the conclusion we got to in verse 6. But of these who seem to be somewhat, they seem to be important. But God doesn't, no respecter of persons, so jump to the end. For they who seem to be somewhat in confidence added nothing to me. Here's the important part. Here's the key verse of this first visit. They added nothing to the gospel. Now, what matters there, Brother Wayne, is it does not say this. It does not say, they didn't say we needed circumcision. This is not a battle about circumcision. Brother Moyer, it's not just about circumcised or not circumcised. That's the word that comes up often. In fact, we'll see them be known as the group of circumcision. But this is not about circumcision. They weren't talking just about circumcision, which is why he doesn't say, he says they added nothing. Nothing. Circumcision or anything else. The gospel is Jesus plus nothing. There's nothing you can add, because what was being argued right here was not just circumcision, it was all of the ceremonial laws. It was, sometimes they're called the clean laws, because Heather, these are the laws that ceremonially make you clean to attend worship. They deal with what you wear. You know, you can't mix flax and wool. They deal with what you eat. They deal with what you touch. They deal with how you wash. You know, Leviticus will tell you how to go to the bathroom, how far out of the city you need to go, dig the hole, cover it back up. Okay, these are the laws these are the ceremonial laws to make you clean. And he says they added nothing. Not wash, not dress, not eat, nothing, not touch. Because these things they can't accomplish. You add nothing to the gospel. Now, I like that. That makes me go, yeah. But I understand the problem. And sometimes we ignore the problem, and we really need to deal with it. Miss Pat, here's the problem. That's not the Talmud. That's not some Pharisee or rabbi's interpretation of how far is far or what makes work. That's Leviticus. That's Bible. So here comes the confusion. Is Paul saying that we do not have to honor parts of the Bible? Because that's what happens. I mean, you go and talk to somebody about, go and talk to some young person who's dating. You know, the Bible says, be not unequally yoked. Oh, yeah, but it also says, go this far outside of the city, dig a hole. We don't do that anymore. Well, you know, the Bible says, yes, but it also says, don't eat pork. I'm going to Harry's after church. You going with me? So are you teaching me we get to pick and choose what we honor and what we don't honor? No. And we'll get to that, but I didn't want to wait and not bring it up at all. Alana, no, that's not what he's saying. In fact, what he's saying is exactly this. No, we need to honor the Bible. Honor anything means to honor its purpose and why it was brought about. The ceremonial laws never cleaned you. They were never enough, which is why you still offered a blood sacrifice. The purpose of the ceremonial laws, Brother Moyer, was to prove and show you that you can't do it. Peter would write, it is to be your schoolmaster. It's to bring you to that place. The writer of Hebrews in Hebrews chapter 10 said, you do this once a year all the time. Guess what? He came to fulfill the law, so it's never done again. It's done once. He's not saying you pick and choose what you honor and what you don't honor. What he's saying is to honor the Bible, you honor its purpose. The purpose of the ceremonial law was to show you, yes, this is not come as you are. Yes, he requires holiness. And yes, the only way that comes is the gospel. And to try to put somebody back into a place where they're striving to accomplish themselves is to put them back into bondage. And so the purpose of this beginning was to have this picture. It's not not circumcision. It's not anything. It is living in the light of the gospel. Well, that picture. It's not come as you are. He is holy. Just is the most important thing to this group of the Judaizers. And they just couldn't let go. We must be clean. We must wear the right thing. We must eat the right thing. We must go the right places. We must look. We must talk. The outside is what matters. And we're going to see probably a little bit more next week. But Paul's argument in that if you're a Jew, then you don't act like a Gentile. And if you're a Gentile, it's pretty simple. It's, Miss Pat, if you're a Hebrew and you're custom and you see value in these things because you're a Hebrew, there is value. But if you see value in these things because spiritually they're going to do anything, anathema. Because it's the gospel plus nothing. It's grace. When you start to add something to it, it's a problem. So he begins to roll this out. You see, Jesus is the fulfilling of the law. Culture, okay. It's one of the values of mission trips. Preachers talked to me 3 or 4 times over 5 or 6 years about you need to try to get that group on a mission trip. You need to try to, and it's always a lot of talk. It's just harder to make happen. It's easier to do with teens because they don't work. When you're talking about 20-somethings, it's a little tougher. But one of the great values of going on the mission field is their different cultures. I grew up on military bases overseas. My dad did tour after tour after tour, different place. You know what that meant, Miss Kathy? That meant when I came back, I was like, why is all these things important? Because all these things that, like in the youth group I would go to, people were fighting over, they weren't even... they didn't even exist in a different culture. And one of the great advantages about going on a mission trip is you go to a different culture and you'll start to have to examine yourself. Is my value coming from the fact that I surrender to Christ, I trust in him? Is it all about him? Or is it in what I wear in my Western civilization? And you read early missionary stories, one of the things you'll see is they struggled in the beginning because what they tried to do was westernize, not Christianize. Well, if we're not careful, you know what we do inside the church? We get our value from our westernize, and we don't put much value on the gospel. In fact, like I said last week, the gospel becomes something that we have in the beginning, and then now we're in. But that's not what it is. We live out our faith in the light of the gospel. A couple things, again, just keep in mind. You have to set the foundation of this book, because when you start getting into the doctrinal part of this book, in chapters 3 and 4, you have to keep all of this in mind. But keep this in mind. The church, when the church first started, it was in Jerusalem. It was all Jews. You know what's going on right now, this fight right now? This big struggle is because now you have other people coming in. And now you have other cultures. And that begins to cause issue. Then you go back to last week, what Paul told us, they're phony Christians. He said they're not even real. So you bring in this challenge of other cultures, and then you have phony brothers and sisters whose value is not in grace, but whose value is in performance. And this fight tends to make sense. Now, Ms. Mariner, we've talked about this for 2 weeks. So I know that there's somebody out there saying, Brother Jeremy, you talked about this for 2 weeks. Don't you know anything else? Well, let me be honest, I don't even know this. But if you think you got it in 2 weeks, I'm going to tell you the church right here is 15, 20 years old, depending on, how you go over that timeline. Peter, Paul, James, John, Jude, Mark, they're still struggling with this. So I don't make any apologies for going slow. This is a great struggle. It was a struggle then. It's a struggle now. The gospel is Christ plus nothing. Sometimes let me do this. Brother Moore, you ever had somebody come to you and say, I want to accept Christ, but I know my heart's not pure. I know I don't have pure motives. Okay, you know what they're really saying? They're saying, I'll trust God and I'll trust the gospel you taught me about for all of these things, but I have to take care of the purity of my heart. Or, I've actually had this one a couple times. I've personally had this one. I want to trust you, and I want to follow that, that gospel that you're like talking about stuff, but does it mean I'm going to have to forgive my brother? Well, I'm going to tell you, I messed that up. I did. I messed it up. This is what I said. I don't know exactly what I said. It's 15 years ago, but this is what I said. I said, well, you have to be ready to do that. Well, you know where you get the power to do that? After you're saved. There's just a part of me. There's just a part of me that wants to guard this whole thing. Like sometimes I think we treat Jesus like he's some chump, and I'm going to get the golden ticket, and I'm going to fool him. I'm going to still do whatever I want to, and I think I got to protect him. You want to talk about pride sneaking in? Where's the trust and the faith and the belief in him? Miss Pat, don't look at me like I'm that way. I know you struggle with this too. It's common to man. It's especially common inside the church. It is so easy to focus on the outside. You see, if I could just forgive, if I could just clean up my motives, because actually I'm just doing this all for me. That's the most selfish motives in the whole wide world. Don't you say I'm supposed to love him? If I could just clean this stuff up, then we're back to the ceremonial law where you're not beautiful enough. And if you could just clean yourself up, take a bath, put on the right makeup, put on your best clothes, now you get to go to the groom and say, will you marry me? That's not how it works. Tell you, it's not how it works. Isn't it good that that's not how it works? Because the best clothes you have and the best clothes I have are filthy rags. The best I could do does not make me beautiful. You know what makes us beautiful? He makes us pretty. It's his love, it's his grace, it's his mercy. It is all about him. When we get married, it's his robe of righteousness that we wear. It is just Jesus. But we struggle. We just want to fight for the right to work. We want to hold on to strive. Romans chapter 4. If you don't have this verse marked, it's good verses to mark. Not often quoted, by the way. Usually you kind of skip over Romans 4. The reason we skip over Romans 4 is because it smacks us where we live, because we're trying to get our value from what we do. We're trying to be a performance-based society. Romans chapter 4, verse 4. Now to him that worketh is the reward not reckoned of grace. You put anything in there, there is not grace. It is now a debt. It is something you're owed. You know when I'm owed, Dr. Bohr, when I'm owed something, it's mine. I did it. You know what grows inside of me? My pride. I deserve it. You want to talk about the danger of adding to? Verse 5. But to him that worketh not. How do we get in this Christian thing? We quit working. Quit working. How about offering that? Guess what? You get to quit work. You don't get to quit working, but you get to quit working. But to him that worketh not, but believeth on him, that justifieth the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness. He makes us pretty. His love is put on the outside of us. It's his robe. So here's what we do. Kelly, you and I, we agree about all that law stuff. those Judaizers, they had it wrong. But, gospel, we get saved. Now I start working. After all, faith without works is dead. So now I got to strive and work and to keep myself pretty. You know, to that group, he said, the best you have is filthy rags. Those were Hebrews. You think, okay, I get saved, I'm in the family. Now all of a sudden I can produce better? No, still the best I have is filthy rags. But sure, you know, the best thing about being a Christian is I don't have to keep myself pretty. I am not fooling him. I can polish the outside as much as I want to. You know why I'm beautiful? Because the only thing that can is he looks at me and says, I love you. See, but we don't like that because that's humbling. You know what that makes me totally dependent? There's nothing I can do. Welcome to the Beatitudes. Blessed are the broken and poor and needy and beggarly and have nothings. You've heard me probably the longest in here. You know, this might be my favorite verse. It's definitely my most quoted one. It comes from that book of John. If I be lifted up, I will draw all men. See, he really is that beautiful. So how does this work? If it's not, I have to take a bath first. And if it's not, I take a bath after because of, how does all, but faith without works. Are you saying you don't honor the book of James? No, Heather, you know, I'm talking about viewpoint. I'm talking about motivation. I'm talking about belief. Okay, you know what? If I be lifted up, I'll draw all men to me. I married him. So that's not weird to say. That is not weird. I've been saying that for 30 years. I'm so happy about that. And here's the problem. No man has seen him at any time, so I don't have any problem bragging about him. Because he's great and he's good and grace and love. But when I married him, 46 years ago, you know how much I knew about him? I've grown in knowledge and in love and in grace. So this isn't about working to stay beautiful or working to, this is about I want to be like him because he is wonderful. And the more I'm around him, the more I want to be like him, the more it motivates me, the more it changes me. It is all about him. This whole life is about him. And anytime I try to pull it down and make it about me, I mess it up. Now, the problem with all of that is to grow in grace and to grow in knowledge and to grow in, we truly have a relationship right here. Right here. Real life relationship. And we have to have a relationship right here. You know why the Judaizers fought so hard for their ceremonial law? Because it replaced real life relationship. I can say the right thing, wear the right thing, not go to the wrong places, and I have value. And you know how easy that is? That's a whole lot easier than sharing my life with him every day, all the time. This is where we left off. That is like the longest introduction to big old porch. You want to know what's sad? Paul's going to deal with this about 6 or 7 more times. You know why? Because it's a struggle. You know how easy it is for me to sit right here and start to, Miss Pat, if I want to feel good about myself, you know the first temptation is to compare what I do, performance, to somebody else. You know what happens in that focus? There's no him. I obey the rules better than you obey the rules. Therefore, I am good. Where's the love? Where's the grace? Where's the mercy? Where's any of his character trait now coming out in my life? Anyway, so now we move on to the second visit. Here's we go, the second visit, verse 11. This one is less about what the gospel is. It's more about how the gospel works. If it has a key verse, it's probably verse 14. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. Very important here. They did not walk, Heather, listen, they didn't walk in the gospel. Okay, because this is where we want to get that whole, okay, the gospel is for salvation, and then now I start striving. No, it says they didn't walk in the truth of the gospel. Heather, it's part of our everyday life. It's what we do all the time. It's how we react. It's how we respond. Everything about us is through the gospel. It is in his grace. Our value is there. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before them all, if thou being a Jew livest after the manner of the Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as do the Jews? So in this verse, I think we're getting this whole picture. This picture is, it's not I get saved and then I make progress by, no. You know how we make progress? Living in the nothing. How do you get saved? You quit. No work. Broken, empty. How do you grow in this Christianity? Okay, I don't know how you do this, but you're more broken and you're more empty. You're more needy. You're more dependent. Miss Kathy, the minute we lose our dependence, pride. And I become me. And I, as Paul said in verse 4 of chapter 1, I leave him who has called me. And I begin to lean on my own crutch. This progress comes from empty. Well, that's what I'll be doing. I'll empty myself more. You know how I see myself more needy? I see more what he does. Even emptying myself comes from looking at him. I can't even do that right. Because nothing dies harder than the desire to think well of me. So, I said we're getting into this part, and this part really deals with more what the gospel brings about in our life. Two things, and those two things are this. First, the gospel keeps us from being intimidating persecutors. Doug, you hear that? Living in the light of the gospel will keep you and I from being intimidating persecutors, because that's what the Judaizers were. Those phony Christians, those phony brothers and sisters, like Paul called them, you would think they'd quit. You would think they'd give up. But no, here they are, still following after. I mean, we just left the top part. We decided, you and I decided, right? I mean, that's all it takes, you and I decided, because the preacher's going to agree with you. You and I decided. That's everybody except Matthew, right? That's pretty much the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, they're wrong, you're right. They'd quit, right? No, but they can't quit. They can't. Everything comes from there. And they come up with this intimidating persecution and pressure. It's so much intimidation, it snags Peter and says he's afraid. The other thing it does, if it keeps us from becoming that, it does make us do this. It makes us be loving confronters. Now, they're very different things. And they're done in very different ways. And here's the problem. It's really easy to do the first one. It's really easy to become the intimidating, attacking, belittling. It's really hard to become the loving confronter. But we see the contrast here in Paul and the Judaizers. Remember, I am shocked that they can't quit, but then you give it a little bit of thought. We've already said these things. Judaizers can't quit because they're performance-based. Any performance-based religion is full of this way. If it's performance-based, guess what I'm going to tell you? I know I didn't perform well enough. Now, I've polished the outside, so you don't know. After all, this is a $38 tie. I even put starch on this shirt this morning, So, no movies. I mean, I got this. But on the inside, bitterness, or struggle, or I know turmoil. Okay, so that creates an. You know how I feel that insecurity? With the pride of better than. So I may not be a little bit, I may know my weakness, but I am way better than Brother Fieldhouse. Look, he didn't even put on the tie. I got $38 more credibility than he does. I have more these and thous. Ieth, gunneth, prayeth, longeth, beforeth, I eateth. I know that sounds silly, but if we're honest, that is a truth we all fight with from time to time. Living in the light of the gospel is humbling. It stops that. It deters that. That is the anathema that has us cannibalize the immature in the church. Because I'm better than them. Well, they're going to come and cuddle up with us? You keep slapping them, they ain't coming to huddle. They're weaker. I wonder why this age group is never, it's not too hard to figure out. Since they can never live up to our level, they'll go find somewhere else they can. But the other side of this is to be the confronter. To this, Paul steps in. Not with the backbiting, not with the attacking, living in the grace of the gospel. We'll see later when he gets to chapter 6, his purpose is restoration. Here's one of the great reasons for confrontation is, look, no, I don't want you, you're too mean. Hank, I want you to confront me. Because there just might be a chance I don't know what I'm doing. There might be a chance emotions gotten too high or my brain's not thinking. Let me tell you, I don't want to run off that cliff. I want you to stop me. And here comes Paul, not the big meanie, Peter's real friend. And he comes in to confront. Confront in love with the purpose of restoration. It really ought to be how we live. And it ought to happen all the time. You know how many young people have come to me to say, I want to date him or her, but my parents don't approve? You know what they want from me? They want me to pull out one of those things. Well, the Bible says walk out here, and bury this song, so, you don't have to listen to all of it. Let's just throw away that authority part where the parents are in there and you just go and do it, and that's what they want me to say. If I want to be liked by them, you know what I have to say? But living in the light of the gospel is going to take it to the place where you're, all right, well, let's walk through this. What makes him? Where is the character? You've known him how long? And that is worth risking the support and love of your father and mother over the last 25 years. Okay, there is a way to confront in love. And I'll say this again, I'll say this until I can't speak anymore. The way to do that is with question. If you'll look and read the words written in red, our Savior was an expert questioner. He very seldom gave us the answer. He gave us the question with obviously only one place to go. Because I can argue with your conclusion, but if you bring me to the same place, it's hard to argue with myself. Confronter. Understand when I say, all right, so I know you love Miss Debbie, right? This part you say yes. Nope, not on camera, too bad. I tried to set you up. You love Miss Debbie, right? So you want Miss Debbie to know that you love her, right? All right, so then you go into the loving confrontation. But last night when you did boom, 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 how was she supposed to see love? Where in that? How did that accomplish your main purpose? You see, all of that gives you benefit. It doesn't take for granted that you were trying to hurt her. It puts us where we really are. You're in flesh and I'm flesh and we make errors. And we need confronted sometimes to see those errors. Peter did. So, one of the benefits of confrontation is exactly that. It helps us see our errors. Here's another one, though. It's not quite so fun. This is why we don't like doing it. Preacher, one of the benefits of confrontation is it pulls the sheep skin off of the wolf. See, Paul confronted Peter. Peter repented. But what happens when they don't? Because real Christians, they're going to. Sometimes, I'm pig-headed, and you might have to tell me twice. You might have to ask me harder questions. You might have to have follow-up. I might just be a little stubborn. But keep in mind the difference between stubborn and steadfast. They're just what you're fighting for. You don't want to kill that stubbornness. You just want to change what I'm fighting for. That's where your leaders come from. So sometimes maybe it's a little difficult, but ultimately, a Christian living in the light of the gospel will repent. But if you deal with a performer, you will get bit. When you pull that sheepskin off and you start attacking their value, here, attack my value. You did wrong. Yep. Nowhere do I think my value comes from being perfect. Hey, Katie with the ring, smack her. You with the ring, you're going to join this family. It's not perfect. It's not why you join it. It's a commitment to love. We got to stop. I want to get this one point out. Really, this passage right here breaks down to the 3 points. You get his confrontation, you get the why, and you get the results. Verse 11. Very important word. But when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him. Extremely important. Because this is what happens. Preacher, I mess up all the time. And I really do mean that. Sometimes I just need someone to come and ask me some good questions. Now, if you come swinging a bat, I'll throw a ball. That's not pride. That's not me bragging about it. I regret that. Because then I have to come back and apologize for throwing the ball too. But I really wish you would come asking some questions in love, and I would be much more grateful for it early on, and not have to apologize later. But when you come in that aspect, I tend to look at it like you're attacking me. The confronter is the initiator. The confronter is the one doing the violence, bringing the fight. That's why I like this word so much. I withstood him. You know what Paul says? That's a defensive term. That is, your army is attacking me, and I am withstanding. Let me show you. The confronter is not the attacker. The attacker is the one who does the deed. The confronter is the loving brother. In fact, I'll go so far as to say this. Peter was wrong. He was in sin. If Paul did not confront, he would have been. Most of the time, I think we struggle in the ministry of confronting because we're afraid of getting bit. But when we don't confront, we don't expose the wolves, and we don't truly love each other. Brother Hank, close in a word of prayer.